Hey, what is up, guys, and welcome back to my channel. And today's episode is going to be something really special. So, this year's F1 game was launched with the Deluxe Edition featuring none other than Michael Schumacher and also featuring four of his most iconic cars: the 1991 Jordan 191, the 1994 Benetton B194, its successor Benetton B195, and the Ferrari F2000. So we thought it would be so cool to be a part of that legacy and drive around in all these cars one by one. Try to race them with other retro cars just to experience the legacy of Michael through his cars. So together, let's see how these cars look in the game, how they drive around, and just to relive Michael's journey in Formula One. So obviously, all this has to start from the very first car that he debuted in, that is the 1991 Jordan 191. We get to drive in a deluxe custom suit made for this car that's just amazing and great attention to detail by Codemasters. And before we begin racing, here's a quick historical preview into the F1 debut of Michael Schumacher.
Schumacher made the jump from sports cars to Formula One at the 1991 Belgian Grand Prix and took the world's breath away. The emerald green Jordon 191 was the machine in which history was to be made. At its wheel, the most successful driver the sport had ever known made his debut and made his mark with a remarkable 7th place in quali.
So as was the case, it's quite fitting that we drive around the Spa circuit in Michael Schumacher's debut race in Formula 1 and try to see where we finish in today's race. So if you are new to my channel and haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Please go ahead and subscribe to my channel by clicking the red subscribe button and hitting the bell icon to get latest notifications of all the amazing F1 content coming your way. So let's begin with the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps.
Based in the magnificent Ardennes countryside, Spa hosted its first Grand Prix back in 1925. This historic track is loved by drivers and fans alike. So it's welcome to the Belgian Grand Prix. Spa-Francorchamps today, a circuit that spans 4.35 miles. There are tons of elevation changes along the way too. 19 corners making up this circuit.
Today we are starting off in P15 and the grid is filled with all the other retro cars which are part of the game, so it's quite cool to be honest. And as the 5 lights are off and we are underway as Michael Schumacher in his debut race driving for the Jordan 191 at the Belgian Grand Prix. This is actually the first time that I'm driving this car, and you can see for yourself as I completely slam into the back of Benetton of Forest as I try to cross the hairpin at turn 1, and now getting ready for one of the most iconic pieces of track in F1 history, that is the Eau Rouge. Up to 6th gear, flat out, going side by side with the 1994 Benetton and actually managing to pass it up the hill. In the original race, Schumacher had actually burned out his clutch even before reaching Eau Rouge, so at least we were able to achieve that milestone for him. But this is wherein lies the difference. It is on the back straight that the pace or lack thereof will hurt us compared to the faster cars behind us, assuming that they are faster than us, because 6th gear is the maximum you can go with this car. Man, this car is so planted. I mean, the downforce on this is just simply incredible. Maybe we can try to go on the inside of the Williams and Benetton on this turn as we try to move on the inside, but we just couldn't get the turn properly and actually get bogged down with the Benetton in front of us, and in process we get re-overtaken again by both the cars and still remain in P10. There are a lot of fun facts related with Michael's debut in this race. The Jordan driver at that time, Bertrand Gachon, had an altercation with a London taxi driver which forced him out for the remainder of the season. This forced team boss Eddie Jordon to look for a replacement driver, and thus entered Michael Schumacher. Michael was actually a sports car racer driving for the Mercedes team at that time and did not have any prior Formula One running experience. But his genius was at full display as he qualified at P7 for his debut F1 race, which was actually 4 places ahead of his much experienced teammate Andrea De Cesaris. He in fact just drove 20 laps before getting ready for the qualifying and race that weekend. And while we are going through the last sector of the circuit at the end of lap 1, we are involved in a battle for 9th place with Sari. Quite a back and forth tussle happening between both the cars to keep the position as we try to size him up and go for a move on the outside in the last turn. We brake late on the outside, we make contact, but we somehow manage to stick it and get P9 in the process. Not the cleanest of moves, but we'll take it. As we cross the start-finish line to start lap 2, we are immediately passed by a McLaren, but we outbrake it to retain our position into the hairpin at turn 1, pressing the throttle gently in order to avoid the back end of the car to start running away from us. going up the gears up to sixth gear now, approaching Orush as we end up running wide on both the curves on the entry as well as the exit. No DRS or overtake option on these cars. So this is the max flat out you can possibly run with them. The Williams behind is sizing us up to go for a move on the inside, but we stick to the racing line and cover his tracks, forcing him to brake, thus still remaining in P9. Now we need to see how we can catch up to the guys ahead of us. Cutting now to the start of lap 3, we cross the start finish line and we now prepare to navigate the short straight onto the tricky hairpin on turn 1, and we end up running wide, allowing the Benetton to take the position back from us. Ironically, that is the next team which Michael drove, as he only drove for the Jordon team just this one race, setting up nicely for Oruj, running almost flat out 6th gear, and we almost nearly run into the back of the Benetton, but we may be able to get him on the slipstream as we move from right to left to set up nicely for the braking point, while also looking back to check on the fast approaching McLaren. But while doing so, we move out of the track and onto the grass, completely missing the braking point, deciding to take the inside line, but we couldn't stop our car on time. We end up spinning and facing the wrong way, and with that we actually end up doing any good, and oh, we hit one of the cars on our way out, and so lots of things happening at the same time, and we end up getting a 3-second penalty for that collision, and with that we end up at the back of the grid, and I'm completely certain now that we will not be able to finish into points. Oh man, that was not quite we were expecting, and also quite a heartbreak for us as we are now completely at the back, and I do not see us getting back with the guys driving in front. Those last few corners were quite eventful. So now we decide to switch to cockpit cam, as I thought that at least if nothing, we can still experience something different while completing the rest of the race. And to be honest, I'm actually quite liking this camera angle, as it is allowing me a much better perspective of the track from the view of a driver. I don't know, that's just my feeling with it. You guys can let me know in the comments below which camera angle do you find best while driving. Oh man, look at the steering and the indicators of on the display of this car. There's literally nothing on the steering. There are no paddle shifters, as there's manual gear lever for gear shifting, and hardly any indicators on the display ahead. Compared to today's modern cars, who have just about everything on the steering wheel, with so many controls and settings just on the steering itself, it boggles your mind. And the amount of adjustments the driver is able to perform on the car, even while driving, is simply incredible. Just gets to show you how technology and the sport of Formula 1 itself has evolved over the years. This is what drivers had to deal with around 30 years ago. But everything aside, I am having quite a blast driving this car around Spa. And I feel just so happy to have been able to experience this on my own, as Michael has been my idol all my life. And to get to drive all of his cars in this game is something I am truly enjoying, and is just something I may not be able to properly put across in words. It is quite astonishing to know that Michael actually drove this car for Jordan just once in his life, and that was this very race, because by the time they arrived in Italy for the next race, Benetton had already secured him for the remainder of the season, with Roberto Moreno going the other way. And in Monza, which was just his second race in Formula 1, Michael actually finished 5th, one place ahead of his 3 times world champion teammate Nelson Piquet. I mean, the writing was on the wall as to what was about to come in the coming years, but more on that in the next video. As we go through the last lap of this Grand Prix, Rashid Nair in his McLaren MP430 has already won this race. Even though we would have liked to be in that position to get for some points or even go for a win, but that's not to be today. At least we tried our best and we were actually doing quite well before we had that awful spin. But this video is not about that. It's about experiencing the legacy of Michael and his wonderful array of cars which he drove across his career. Today, driving this car, one can think back to the very first time when Michael Schumacher entered this sport and how he went on to define the next decade and a half of Formula 1 racing. As we cross the last few corners onto the start finish straight one last time to mark the end of today's Belgian Grand Prix as a debuting Michael Schumacher.
Okay, pick up rubber and bring it home.
So with that, we end today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and do subscribe to my channel. In the next video, we shall be driving another one of Michael's iconic cars and relive some of the amazing moments which occurred in that championship year. With that, I thank you all for watching. Stay safe and goodbye.